For he now, it is supposed, exchanges what is called amal e jismani, or corporeal worship, for amal e ruhani, or spiritual adoration. But this stage cannot be attained save by great piety, virtue, endurance, and resignation, for it is necessary to restrain the intellect when weak, until from habits of mental devotion, grounded upon a proper knowledge of its own greatness and immortality, and of the divine nature, it shall have acquired a sufficient energy, since the mind cannot be trusted in the omission or disuse of the rites and usages of religion. The third stage is Aruf, signifying knowledge or inspiration, and the disciple who arrives thereunto is said to have attained superhuman knowledge, in fact, to be inspired, and when he has reached this stage, he is equal to the angels. The fourth and final stage arrived at is Haqiqat, or truth itself, which signifies that his union with the divinity is perfect and complete. The dignity of Khalifa as the teacher is designated can only be obtained after long continued fasting and prayer, and by complete abstraction and severance from all mundane things, for the man must be annihilated before the saint can exist. The preparation for the third stage of Sufism requires a protracted and fearful probation, and many lose their lives in their efforts to attain it. The person who makes the essay must be a devout and godly murid, or disciple, who is already advanced by his piety and abstraction beyond the necessity of observing religion's forms and usages. He must begin by endeavoring to attain a higher state of beatitude by a lengthened fast, which should not be less than 40 days. And during this period of fasting, he remains in solitude and in a posture of contemplation, and takes no sustenance save enough to keep body and soul together. The character of the votary greatly depends on the patience and fortitude he may display during this severe ordeal, and when reduced to a mere skeleton, the disciple comes forth from his solitude. He still has years of trial to endure. He must wander about, companionless, in desert places, or remain in some frightful solitude, only seeing occasionally the Khalifa, our spiritual guide, whom he follows. For the chief merit of all ranks of Sufis is complete devotion to their teachers. When he dies, he leaves his kirka, or patched garment, and worldly wealth to the disciple he considers the most worthy to succeed him. And when the latter dons the holy mantle, he is invested with the power of his predecessor. For the most celebrated Sufi teachers have been alike famed for their devotion and their learning in Persia as well as in other countries, and in the former, Sufis have claimed for their own all who have, by their writings or sayings, shown a spirit of philosophy or knowledge of the nature divine, which has elevated them above the prejudices of the vulgar. And certainly great numbers of persons eminent for their learning, genius, and piety have adopted the Sufi doctrines. Among the most distinguished of these are poets, for the very essence of Sufism is poetry. The raptures of genius, expatiating upon a subject that cannot be exhausted, are held to be divine inspirations by those who believe that the soul, when emancipated by devotion, can wander in the regions of the spiritual world and at last unite with its creator, the source from whence it emanated. Is the same with all Sufi poets, whatever be their country, but Persia is more generally known as that in which this species of poetry was supposed to have reached its highest degree of perfection. But it will be discovered from the following pages that Sufism has produced, amongst the rough and hardy Afghans, conceptions equally as sublime. Human speech, however, to quote the words of a writer already mentioned, is too weak and too imperfect to convey these lofty experiences of the soul. and hence these can only be represented by symbols and metaphors. For this reason, the Sufi poets, to quote the words of Sir William Jones, adopt the fervor of devotion and the ardent love of created spirits towards their beneficent creator. And Sufi poetry consists almost wholly of a mystical religious allegory, though it seems to the uninitiated ear to contain merely the sentiments of wild and voluptuous bacchanals. But though we must admit the danger of such a poetical style, where the limits between enthusiasm and depravity are so minute as to be scarcely distinguishable. For the mystical meaning of their poetry, save in the poems of the Afghan poet Mirza, never or rarely obtrudes itself. We may, if we choose, pass it by, confining ourselves to those passages alone which tell of a mundane passion and a terrestrial summer and wine, under the veil of earthly love and the woes of temporal separation. They disguise the dark riddle of human life and celestial banishment, which lies beyond the threshold of existence, and under the joys of revelry and inebriation. They figure mystical transports and ecstatic raptures. Still, we must not censor it severely, and must allow it to be natural, though a warm imagination may carry it beyond the bounds of sober reason. For, to quote the same author, an ardently grateful piety is congenial to the undepraved nature of man, whose mind, sinking under the magnitude of the subject and struggling to express its emotions, has recourse to metaphors and allegories, which sometimes extends beyond the bounds of cool reason and often to the brink of absurdity. Thoreau, who would have been the sublimest mathematician if his religious turn of mind had not made him the deepest theologian of his age, describes love as an affection or inclination of the soul towards an object proceeding from an apprehension and esteem of some excellence or convenience in it, as its beauty, worth, or utility, and producing, if it be absent, a proportionable desire, and consequently an endeavor to obtain such property in it, such possession of it, such an approximation to it or union with it, as the thing is capable of, with a regret and displeasure and failing to obtain, are in the want and loss of it, begetting likewise a complacent satisfaction and delight in its presence, possession, or enjoyment, which is moreover attended with a goodwill towards it, suitable to its nature, that is, with the desire that it should arrive at or continue in its best state, with a delight to perceive it thrive and flourish, with the displeasure to see it suffer or decay, and with a consequent endeavor to advance it in all good and preserve it from evil. Agreeably to this description, which consists of two parts and was consigned to compromise the tender love of the Creator toward created spirits, the great philosopher burst forth in another place with his usual animation and command of language. In the following panegyric on the pious love of human souls towards the author of their happiness. Love is the sweetest and most delectable of all passions, and when by the conduct of wisdom it is directed in a rational way towards a worthy, congruous, and attainable object, it cannot otherwise than fill the heart with ravishing delight, such in all respects superlatively such is God, who, infinitely beyond all other things, deserveth our affection, as most perfectly amiable and desirable, as having obliged us by innumerable and inestimable benefits. All the good that we have ever enjoyed or can expect being derived from his pure bounty, all things in the world, in competition with him, being mean and ugly, all things without him vain, unprofitable, and hurtful to us. He is the most proper object of our love, for we chiefly were framed, and it is the prime law of our nature to love him. Our soul, from its original instinct, verges towards him as its center, and can have no rest till we fix on him. He alone can satisfy the vast capacity of our minds, and fill our boundless desires. He of all lovely things most certainly and easily may be obtained, for whereas commonly men are crossed in their affections, and their love is embittered from their affecting things imaginary, which they cannot reach, are coy things, which disdain or reject them. It is with God quite otherwise. He is the most ready to impart himself. He most earnestly desireth and wooeth our love. He is not only most willing to correspond in affection, but even doth prevent us therein. He doth cherish and encourage our love by sweetest influences and most consoling embraces, by kindest expressions of favor, by most beneficial returns, whereas all other objects do in the enjoyment much fail our expectation. He doth even far exceed it. Wherefore in all affectionate motions of our hearts towards God, in desiring him, in seeking his favor or friendship, in embracing him, are setting our esteem, our goodwill, our confidence on him, in enjoying him by devotional meditations and addresses to him. In a reflective sense, our interest and propriety in him, in that mysterious union of spirit whereby we do closely adhere to and are, as it were, inserted in him in a hearty complacence in his benignity, a grateful sense of his kindness, and a zealous desire of yielding some requital for it. We cannot but feel very pleasant transports. Indeed, that celestial flame kindled in our hearts by the spirit of love cannot be void of warmth. We cannot fix our eyes on infinite beauty. We cannot taste infinite sweetness. We cannot cleave to infinite felicity without also perpetually rejoicing in the first daughter of love to God, charity towards men, which in complexion and careful disposition doth much resemble her mother. For such doth rid us of all these gloomy, keen, turbulent imaginations and passions, which cloud our mind, which fret our heart, which discompose the frame of our soul, from burning anger, from storming contention, from gnawing envy, from rankling spite, from racking suspicion, from distracting ambition and avarice, and consequently thus settle our mind in an even temper, in a sedate humor, in a harmonious order, in that pleasant state of tranquility which naturally doth result from the avoidance of irregular passions.